I was 27 when I learned that the person who taught me how to braid my hair could also unspool my life with a single sentence. "She's stronger and better for you," my mother told my boyfriend in a kitchen I knew better than my own heartbeat. A room that still smelled like cinnamon from the rolls we'd iced together that morning. I didn't hear it from her mouth directly, at least, not at first. I heard it through the thin seam of the door, the words drifting out like steam and scalding me anyway. Mark had gone to get us drinks. I'd followed a beat later, and there it was, my mother's voice turning the floor under me to glass. I wish I could tell you I pushed the door open, that I said something righteous and unforgettable. But the truth is, I froze, a woman, an artist raised to be polite in all the wrong moments, listening to the story of my life being rewritten without me in the room. I'm Audrey. I'm a painter, the kind who can spend 4 hours mixing one color because it has to feel like the exact second before rain. When this happened, I was working the counter at a cafe by day and sketching portraits no one bought by night, clinging to the belief that art was still a future I could afford. My older sister Elizabeth was already an associate at a law firm, Sharp Suits. Sharper smile. The daughter who made our mother's friends raise their eyebrows in impressed little arches. Me. I was the soft one, the dreamer, the girl who dressed the family walls in homemade canvases, and learned early to hide how much it cost to be compared to a trophy in a glass case. I wish I could tell you that Mark laughed, that he said, "Of course not. Mrs. Davis, I love your younger daughter, and I'm not speaking to her like bait dangled over a pond." But he didn't. His silence was a tide pulling out. I watched the fish flop on the sand and told myself they could still breathe. A week later, he started saying Elizabeth's name, in the kind of casual way that's never casual if you're listening. Her trial victory, her half marathon, that documentary she recommended. A month later, our dates evaporated. 2 months later, I found a blouse in his hallway I knew belonged to my sister. The sound of concert tickets hitting the floor when I opened his bedroom door is one of those sounds I will hear until I'm 80, paper exploding into confetti at a party I was never invited to. There are hurts that howl and there are hurts that hollow. This one did both. I went home and faced my mother in the same kitchen where she'd served his betrayal like hors d'oeuvres. "Don't be dramatic," she said, arranging flowers that to me looked like apologies pinned to stems. "Relationships end all the time. Your sister worked harder. She deserves someone who matches her." I remember touching the countertop, the cool laminate, and understanding with the kind of clarity you pay for in blood that my mother had never really seen me. She had seen two daughters and decided which one looked more like her reflection in the good silver. You can survive without the people you love. It's the person you were with them that's harder to bury. That night I packed my car with the sort of hope that looks like foolishness from the outside. I left a note on the kitchen table, 3 words that were not a threat so much as a vow. "Watch me thrive." Jamie, my best friend since 4th grade, hugged me outside her apartment and offered her couch. I told her I couldn't heal in a city where every traffic light turned green for Elizabeth. I drove west until the skyline was a stranger. Chicago rain slicking the streets like they'd been painted with a palette knife. The motel reeked of cigarettes and shame, and I let myself cry for 5 minutes. Phone timer said a mercy with a hard stop, then opened my laptop and hunted for jobs I'd never wanted and apartments I couldn't afford. Starting over feels like stealing from yourself. I took a studio with an elevator that coughed more than it climbed, taped job listings to the fridge with magnets shaped like pizza slices, and told myself I had 30 days to make a life before my savings evaporated. Day 28. I walked into an interview for an administrative job and walked out hired instead as an assistant to a junior associate who looked like he hadn't slept since the financial crisis. His name was Patrick Reynolds. His office was a storm of paper and takeout boxes, which he navigated like a man who'd drawn the map himself and then lost it on purpose. "Tell me why an art major from Philadelphia wants to work in finance," he asked, and I could have lied. I could have said stability, long-term growth, the challenge. What I said instead was, "Because sometimes you have to burn the map of your old life and draw a new one." He stared at me long enough that I wondered if I'd made a mistake. then nodded once as if I'd given the right passcode to a door I couldn't yet see. He hired me on the spot. I learned to color code spreadsheets the way I used to layer skies. I labeled files by risk profile and let the words sustainable yield compliance sink under my skin until they stopped sounding like a foreign language. Grief doesn't vanish, it mutates. Mine became hunger. I took my lunch break standing by a window that faced an alley filled with dumpsters and cigarette smoke, eating noodles out of a paper boat and telling myself I was not a failure. I was a seed that had been ripped out of shallow soil and pushed deeper where the roots can hold. When Patrick texted his brother about a disastrous date and sent it to me by mistake, I laughed for the first time in months. When I spilled coffee on a stack of reports and he said, "It's just paper, the data's backed up." Breathe, I did. I breathed. 6 months later, he slid a business plan across a table sticky with restaurant lacquer and asked me to help him build something that wasn't about making rich people richer. Operations manager, he said, eyes tired, but lit from somewhere the world can't snuff out. Not assistant. Partner in the doing. My heart skidded in my chest, that good kind of fear. I said yes. We left the old firm and started a company in an apartment where the dining table was a boardroom and client calls happened in the bedroom with the door closed. We ate spring rolls and made budgets and failed small 100 ways before we began to succeed. Somewhere in there, without fanfare, the man who trusted my judgment more than anyone ever had took my hands and said, "Be my partner in everything," and it didn't feel like rescue. It felt like a lighthouse we built together and finally dared to light. Years passed like that, work, love, until the morning I opened a magazine and saw my sister's law firm on the brink of bankruptcy and my ex-boyfriend's career reduced to compliance at a company my husband was about to acquire. Fate has a cruel sense of humor, but sometimes it comes dressed as closure. When Patrick suggested we host a gala to welcome the new team into our corporate family, I looked at the guest list and circled 3 names with a hand that didn't tremble. My mother, my sister, the man who let me become a ghost. Not for revenge, for proof to myself, most of all, that I was no longer haunting the past. I was living a life the past could not imagine. The night of the gala felt like a dream I had painted years earlier, but never believed would dry on canvas. The venue was a glass-walled atrium overlooking the city skyline, the kind of place where chandeliers looked like frozen fireworks and every guest carried the hum of ambition in their step. My dress was silk-deep emerald, hugging me with the kind of confidence I once thought belonged only to women like Elizabeth. But that evening, it felt like it had always been mine. I had just been waiting for the moment I could finally wear it without apology. Patrick was flawless in his tuxedo, though he tugged at his bow tie like it was conspiring against him. His hand brushed mine as we greeted the first guests, a signal that we were in this together. For years, I had been the girl on the edges of rooms, polite, invisible, smiling until my jaw ached. But tonight, people leaned toward me when I spoke. They shook my hand with reverence. They said my name as if it was already carved into the pillars of the industry. And then I saw them. My mother, her posture as straight as ever, her face arranged in the kind of careful pride she wore like perfume. Elizabeth, dazzling in a silver gown that glittered under the lights, her arm looped through Mark's. He had aged, but not with grace, the lines on his face etched deep, not from wisdom, but from chasing shadows of success that kept outrunning him. For a moment, time froze. I was 27 again, standing outside that kitchen door listening to my world collapse. But then I blinked, and the present surged back. This time, I wasn't trembling in the shadows. I was the host. This was my stage. Their eyes found me almost at once. Mark's jaw tightened as if swallowing bitterness. Elizabeth's smile faltered, the briefest crack in her polished veneer. And my mother, her lips parted just slightly like she was looking at a ghost she thought she had buried. "Ready," Patrick whispered, his hand steady at the small of my back. I nodded, and together we stepped into their line of sight. Introductions were unnecessary. Recognition was a blade slicing through the air. I extended my hand to Elizabeth first, my smile calm but unshakable. "Welcome," I said softly. my voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unshed tears I no longer owed her. Her fingers were cold, trembling against mine. Mark didn't take my hand. He just stared as though still trying to reconcile the girl he discarded with the woman now commanding the room. When the speeches began, Patrick spoke first. He told the story of our company, how it was built from scratch, from stubborn hope, from long nights, and relentless belief. He spoke of partnership, trust, resilience. And then he turned toward me, his words catching the room in a net. But none of this would exist without Audrey. He said, his eyes meeting mine. She is the foundation, the vision, the reason any of us are standing here tonight. Applause thundered around us. I felt tears sting but refused to let them fall. Instead, I stepped up to the microphone. I told the story not of betrayal, but of perseverance. I spoke of being overlooked, of being told I was too soft, of starting over, with nothing but a suitcase and a fragile dream. I told them that sometimes family wounds cut the deepest, but that those scars can become the strongest armor. My gaze swept the crowd, and for a brief, deliberate moment, I let it rest on my mother, my sister, and Mark. Their faces were masks cracking under the spotlight. My mother's hands clenched at her clutch. Elizabeth's eyes darted to the floor, and Mark couldn't look away. I ended my speech with a simple truth. You don't have to be the daughter they choose, the partner they expect, or the woman they approve of. You only have to be the person who refuses to disappear. The silence that followed was thick, electric, before it broke into a standing ovation. Cameras flashed. My name filled the room like a song I had written for myself. Later, as the music swelled and guests mingled, my mother approached. Her lips trembled as though shaping an apology. But all that escaped was, "I never thought." She trailed off, her voice cracking. For the first time, I didn't ache for her approval. I didn't need it. I simply nodded and said, "I know." Elizabeth stayed back. Her eyes wet, though she said nothing. And Mark, he left early, his pride too fragile to endure the night. Watching them retreat, I felt no victory, no vengeance, only a profound, liberating peace. For years, I thought my story was about betrayal. But standing there, surrounded by light and laughter I had built, I realized it was about reclamation. This was not revenge, it was resurrection. When the last guests drifted out and the music softened to silence, I lingered in the atrium, the city lights flickering like constellations through the glass. Patrick slipped his jacket over my shoulders, his warmth grounding me, and for a long moment I just stood there, letting the weight of the night settle into my bones. I had spent years running from shadows, but here I was, bathed in light of my own making. The days after the gala felt like echoes of that triumph. Articles appeared about the acquisition, naming me not as someone's assistant or someone's daughter, but as co-founder, as visionary. My inbox filled with invitations to speak at conferences, to tell the story of reinvention. Each headline, each email was another nail sealing the coffin of who I used to be, the overlooked girl who had once been dismissed in her own kitchen. But closure is never clean. A week later, I received a letter in handwriting I knew too well, my mother's. It wasn't long, just a few pages folded into an envelope that smelled faintly of lavender. She wrote about pride, but it was tangled with regret, as if she were trying to braid together an apology without saying the word itself. "I always thought I was protecting you," she wrote. "Perhaps I was only protecting myself." Reading it, I felt a hollow ache, not anger anymore, but grief for the years we had lost, the love that could have been, if only she had seen me clearly. I set the letter in a drawer, not ready to answer, but unwilling to throw it away. Elizabeth didn't write. Instead, she called. Her voice was small, stripped of its usual confidence. "I didn't know what Mom said to him," she confessed, the words spilling like a dam breaking. By the time I realized, it was too late. I wanted to believe it was real. For years I had imagined what I would say if she ever tried to explain herself. Fury, accusation, maybe even forgiveness. But in that moment, all I felt was tired. "I know," I said softly. And for the first time, I understood that forgiveness wasn't for her, it was for me, a way to loosen the chains of the past, so I could walk unburdened into my future. Mark never reached out. I heard through mutual acquaintances that his career continued to wither, that the arrogance he once wore like armor had become a weight dragging him down. I didn't rejoice in it. I didn't need to. Some endings don't require applause. They just fade into silence. Life with Patrick grew richer not because of the wealth we accumulated, but because of the partnership we forged. He saw me wholly and without condition, and in that reflection, I learned to see myself. We traveled standing hand in hand in Florence, laughing under neon signs in Tokyo, walking barefoot along beaches where the waves erased every footprint. And yet, no matter where we went, it wasn't the cities that healed me. It was the quiet mornings when he handed me coffee before I asked, or the nights he listened without interruption as I painted memories into words. Sometimes late at night, I would dream of that kitchen door of my mother's voice slicing through my future. But when I woke, I no longer felt the wound. I felt only the scar, a mark of survival, not defeat. And that is what I want to leave you with. If you've stayed with me through this story, betrayal can burn you to ash, but ashes can be soil too. You can plant yourself again deeper, stronger, and bloom where no one expected. The people who dismissed you, betrayed you, tried to write you out of your own story. They cannot erase you if you refuse to disappear. So if my journey resonated with you, if it stirred something you thought long buried, I ask you to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and truth. And please leave a comment with your own story. Your voice deserves to be heard.